Hey YouTube, welcome back to another Mass Transit video. Today I'm going to talk about a new sample I made, and I did this because one of my customers is having problems with email bounces, and they use Amazon's simple email service to send email. And I've had other people ask questions like, how do I get notifications that come through SNS and the various, Amazon Web Services capabilities? They do a lot of stuff through their simple notification service, and you can subscribe to those topics using SQS, the simple queue service. And MassTransit makes this super easy. So I thought, I was hit with this problem. They needed to keep track of their bounces and complaints. So I thought, hey, let's make a quick sample. And literally a couple hours, I was able to knock this out. So I wanted to kind of share it with you. So first of all, the sample is already up on GitHub. It's the sample-Amazon SES. And this actually doesn't send any emails. But what it does do is it monitors the bounces that come back. So the way I did this is there is an article on Amazon called Handling Bounces and Complaints. And this talks, it shows some C# code. It shows like all this stuff. And it shows this really gnarly, nasty receive messages call loop thing. I mean, this is like, how you would write code if you were writing straight to the SDK. And it's honestly horrible. But it gave a good example. It talked about the model of the notifications. And so I wanted to show how to do this in MassTransit. So if you pull down the sample, take a look at Program CS, you'll see this is your standard run-of-the-mill MassTransit setup. I'm going to add my consumers from the consumer place. I'm doing some kebab case endpoint name formatting. In this case, I'm setting my pull wait time to 10 seconds because that means that I'll only make 6 calls a minute every time to the thing, and it keeps the SQS usage down. I think it defaults to 3. I bump it up to 10 because why not? I think the max is now 20. And then I do using Amazon SQS. You'll notice there's no host configuration here. Now there's a number of ways to do that. I'm just using the defaults because I'm going to pass environment variables through the SQS transport options, which is right here, and I have that bound to my configuration. But aside from that, I'm setting a couple entity names here for the bounce notification and complaint notification. These are just the raw notification types. I have this Amazon SES bounce, which comes in and it's like the bounce type, the recipients. It's basically just modeling the JSON that comes with that notification. So I'm mapping those to SES bounces and SES complaints. Those are the SNS topic names that I'm going to configure my simple email service to send those bounces and complaints to. And then I'm going to configure endpoints. The rest of the world is pretty simple. I bind the configuration to the transport settings. If we go in here, we can see I have the transport options. I'm using US East 1. You can see I left the access key and secret key blank because I'm actually pulling those through the Docker Compose from a .env file that's in that directory, so I can keep those local and not accidentally push my API keys to the repository. I did follow the MassTransit docs here. If you're using Amazon and want to have a good time and be successful, you can go to the Amazon SQS page, and there is the sample IAM policy. I literally cut and pasted that into a new user account that I created a group and a policy for them, and this worked first time. Created the topics, created the subscriptions, everything worked. So as long as you follow that policy, you'll be good to go. Yeah, so the program is in there. The consumer is pretty simple because I've mapped the JSON type. It actually, MassTransit is pretty easy. It's like, oh, I got a notification. Is there a bounce in there? I do have a couple of invalid checks to make sure that I'm actually getting data because SES will actually send you other notification types like subscription added and other configuration messages that are different notification types. If I get that bounce in recipients and I have some users, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to log some information that bounced, but I also publish an email bounce notification received. And that basically just maps that really rough to deal with, JSON format that they pass down into a message that I can use within my domain. And then as I continue to build this out, I'll have a saga that handles that receive, takes that email address, and then goes and updates the account system to show that that email is not valid and flag that account so that it doesn't get sent to again. Couple of the things to note here is I do have the definitions for those consumers. And the biggest thing that I do is I say I have a use raw JSON deserializer, and I'm passing the options of any message type and setting as at the default deserializer. And this is because these messages are coming from simple email service. They're not coming from MassTransit. and I don't know the message types, but in this case I do. So with this consumer on this queue, I'm able to just assume that every message that goes to that queue is from that SNS endpoint, because that's how I've configured the subscription. So yeah, nothing else is going to send there. I have two separate consumers here. I have a separate one for the complaint because it's a different JSON format. And again, I set those same serializer options. Those have to be on separate queues because I don't necessarily know the contract model of those. Now, there's some advanced ways you could probably figure that out, but that's too complex. This is easy. I like it. It's simple. If I go to AWS, I can see my two queues. If I go to the SNS topics, I can see the subscriptions. All of the permissions and everything are set up by MassTransit. Good to go. So this works great. It's a good example. It has a Docker Compose in the project. So you can just run it locally if you have a .env file with those two, with putting your access key and secret key in there. It's just a good example of how to handle SNS notifications using MassTransit from AWS. So hopefully this was helpful. Like I said, I'll link the description. We'll have the repository, and I'll even link the article that I used to build it. So find this useful, great. Give some feedback, give some comments. Always check out MassTransit, look at the support options, hang out in the Discord. We'll see you in the next video.